Hi there, Randi Green here, and welcome to another podcast. I am going to change the playlist name from alternate human history into alternate human experiences because this is based upon my experiences. And I want to put in here, I did make already talk 20 minutes, and then I ended up in a trap that I didn't want to end up in. And that was, I began making a kind of analytical approach to Stephen Grier, which I've been yesterday blasting through a lot of his material to get head and tail in some of his information. What does he know? Doesn't he know? How he puts it together? And it's not because I want to talk about his person. I stepped into that one anyways. But I wanted to say something that's super important when we talk about these things. First and foremost, it's our experiences. But Stephen Grier is lucky because he's got data, he's got letters, he got sources, he got eyewitnesses that have seen it, felt it, touched it, both alien crafts as well as bodies, as well as the black projects and all these things. So he has witnesses that have had hands-on. And that goes with his demeanor. He is an ER doctor. So he is educated within hardcore sciences. And I'm not doing an analysis here, I'm just putting the facts out that he has presented himself. I'm not making any of this up. He talks about it himself. So I find that to be legit. But just understand here, I'm doing this very cautiously, not because I'm psychoanalyzing Stephen Grier. That's not my job. He has not asked for it. He has not asked for my opinion. I would not appreciate if anyone else did this to me. But I want to work with not the messenger, but the information he's giving. And to understand the information, we need to understand the messenger. So this is what we're doing here. We're doing classification of the messenger so we understand the message. Super important. I'm pretty sure Stephen Grier is a very, very nice guy. He's a man. He's an ER doctor. He grew up in a family that were scientists. He had a near-death experience at the age of 17, which led him to have an out-of-body experience where he was unified with cosmic awareness. And then he came back into his body, and that changed his life. If he had been out of a religious family, and he had had a near-death experience as well, he would most likely come back being even more religious. But here he came back with an expanded scientific awareness compared to some of the other groups that have had near-death experiences that comes back being even more religious and are then beginning to talk about life after death and that Jesus Christ or Allah or anyone else is there to greet them or whatever that is, talking about heaven and hell and all these kind of things that we know within the different already existing religions. So when we talk about near-death experiences, that in itself is a whole other level of information. I know a lot, but I have not put it into a context, into a pattern, so it will make sense. It's still scattered here and there, and it would be more prudent for me to actually do a kind of interview where someone were talking to me about it, where I could pull out these levels of information within the context where they belong. That is psychological, and it has a huge impact on the human psyche, including my mom, who died in 2019, and she was revived, and she had a tremendous change in her behavior and her existence as a human being. The whole scenario that was around her death, when she was at the hospital, my sister called me and they were playing my mom's favorite tune on the television. And that's an old Danish one. And actually, that's one of the tunes I really don't like because she was always listening to that when she was heartbroken because her boyfriend had done something stupid and they were drinking too much. And you can hear I had my own not so fancy childhood. So when I was listening to that, I was saying that, yeah, that's interesting why that is there. And she came back with a message to me as well. And while she was in death or they put her in coma, but after she got revived, they put her in coma. In that 24 hours, I released my mother's soul. I had the whole afterlife, my mom coming back, my grandmother coming back, my grandfather coming back and picking her up and taking her through the gate and taking her away. I had that same with my grandmother. When she died, she came back. When my grandfather died, he came back. So I had this conversation with people that leave their physical form and believe this system. So I know about this from my own experiences. It's not theoretical. So I had that with my mom, and she came back. And while she was in coma, my sister was not ready to let her go. I've released her soul, so my mom is gone. But my sister was not ready, so she pleaded. I said, I have got the grace here, which I have all the time. And they said that they would assist in continuing my mother's life if I wanted to. And I said, no, I have released my mother's soul. Whatever is there is not going to be my mother anymore. So that's a no-go. I'm not attached to the physical form. A test. Because that's what these extraterrestrials do. They're testing us. That's where I want to go with this. They're playing games with us to see what we can and cannot do and what we do and do not do. And that's where I want to go here. That's why I want to call it experiences. And that's where it comes in our personalities and what we have in our luggage and what family we were brought up in and what our basic psychological structure is determines the level of work that we get to work with. Similarly, when you are in these clandestine projects, when you go to the highest clearance level, you are picking your area of expertise due to what you find interesting. Okay, so that's super important that we have that in play as well. There has to be some kind of willingness to the project that you become part of. And reality here is a project, people. This is a project. This is a humongous science project where we are the guinea pigs. Let's just put that way, in different levels on different types of projects. So if we just cope with that first, then it becomes so much more easy to see the rest in that context. And then it says, oh, that makes complete sense, aside from the high order sciences and what it should be, but it has been turned into that. It was not that from the get-go. It was a rehabilitation project that has turned into projects that are no longer in service of those of who are here, but actually dragging us through projects that we have not willingly given consent to, and by that from A to Z are illegal and should not have any stand in any reality whatsoever. But because we are kept in oblivion, we can't say a clear no on the 4th and 5th and 6th dimensional level with our original capacity. And as long as we just say no in our lower human form, it's like the animals saying no. And who listens to animals in this reality anyways? Who listens to the cow that says, no, I don't want to be slaughtered? We slaughter them anyways. So we are setting precedents or allowances for that type of behavior to unfold inside our reality. So if we want these groups that are here treating us differently, we need to treat other life forms on our planet differently and set a completely different type of agenda here, where we're treating everybody with kindness. We're not killing anybody. We're not eating each other, because animals are made of the same kind of molecular composition as we are. So we are technically eating another extension of the planet that's similar to our own physical vessel. So as long as we're doing that, they can do that too. Step 1, that's the 12 choices of living that we are violating on a daily basis just by eating dead animals. And we can call it meat if we like. That's a new label, but it is a dead animal that used to be a life form, that used to have emotions and thoughts, and were living out there eating grass and being quite happy until someone decided, nope, off with your head. And then, by the way, I'm eating you. So that's meat eaters. You're putting the ground for other groups to do the same within different groups of humanity, most likely the ones that are eating meat. Anyways, so these are the cycles of reciprocity, that the way we behave, others are allowed to treat us that way too. Just so you get that understanding. So that's why some of these atrocities are going on, because humans are doing it to each other. Step 1, you can't ask others to do something that you're not doing yourself. Do unto others, remember? Principle 1, be the first of many. And understand that what you are doing in your everyday life, and whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, however you approach the world, whatever you're putting out there, however you respond to whatever's happening, is giving other people allowance to do the exact same thing. If everybody was doing what you were doing, how would the world look? You can just look out and you can see that's why things are not going so well. So we need to change our ways individually first, be a master of our own house, as it's said, and control that to begin with. So going back to the whole affair with my mother, My sister had issues with letting go, and that goes back to her childhood and the experiences she has with my mother, where I have other types of experiences with my mother. And with that, she had something she had not completed yet, and she was kind of, no, I want my mother still to be here. And the Grey said, okay. And then they brought my mother back, but whatever's in my mother's not my mother anymore. And it was okay the first year. She was more vivid, she was more clear, and my sister got a full year where she actually experienced my mother as my mother used to be when she was younger. And that was a good experience. Now, when I look at my mother, I'm just kind of, okay, that's Frankenstein project. It freaks me out. I'm not in contact with my mother anymore because my mother is dead. Her body might still be here, but that's not my mother. And what's going on there, I can't even look at it. And energetically, it's a mess. So just to say that just because people come back doesn't always mean they are who they are and what they used to be. Sometimes there is a walk-in. Okay, so we just putting that in there, and that's an assumption. But Stephen Grier had a near-death experience. He came back, and then his work he began to see crafts, and then his work began. He had 3 encounters that he shows pictures of and have been using for many years. They are from 1919 to 1994, I think it is. One of them is from Andromeda, and that's where I cross Stephen Grier. That's why I keep getting drawn back, because some of the information he has supports some of the information I get. So I'm not listening to him and then I'm replicating what he's saying, but I'm using him as a confirmation of some of the things I'm getting in. So I'm not blabbing out something that is not, should not be blabbed out, because there's so much manipulation for those of us who are in these projects. It is extreme, the degree of manipulation. 98% of the information we get is manipulated to some degree. Similar with the reality out there. Out and inner, exactly the same thing. There is no truth. There is a version of the truth that someone wants to present either deliberately or because it's part of who and what they are as a human being, and by that creates a specific type of information that's been given in a specific way. So Stephen Grier is an ER doctor. He grew up in a family by his own information, with a family that were scientists. Everything was hardcore data. If it couldn't be proven, if it was there, if it wasn't in the data, then it didn't exist. He had his near-death experience that gave him the awareness of cosmic awareness that changed his life. And then he began to see crafts, and then he had these different experiences in the early 90s that led to the beginning of the Disclosure Project. And his experiences with the Andromeda that he saw, as we also know from Alex Collier, he also had contact with Andromedas. I don't know if it were the Andromeda constellation like Alex Collier was in contact with, or the Andromeda galaxy that Stephen Grier was in contact with. I suspect it was some from the Andromeda galaxy, which I have affinity with because I have a past life memory of actually being there. So in that, or an otherworldly life would be more accurate to say so. So that creates a genetic affinity that draws me to Stephen Grier from time to time. So Stephen Grier is working with the clandestine projects within the American government, the black projects that are deep black, as he calls it. Then we have Richard Dolan, that is a historian, and I don't know much about Dolan because he rarely talks about his own person. But he's an historian, and the only thing he has said, he was highly skeptic, then he got into it, and then before we know of it, he was completely sucked in like the rest of us. So that's how it goes. The only other thing he said is what he thought he could be the sledgehammer of change. While in this work for 30 years or so, he has discovered, for now, it's not really making any much change, but I'm still doing it because it's kind of who and what I am, and I enjoy doing what I'm doing. So with that, we change from this whole, I will change the world, into just understanding, okay, this is just what it is. This is what we can do, and we're doing the very best we can. At least we've done what we can, right? So, but the approach that Richard Dolan has, he's a historian, he's an academic. Richard Grier's here I merged them. Stephen Grier is an academic too, but a different type. So let me explain why that's important. Because it's important with the work that we do, who we are. So Richard Dolan, historian, academic, he's working with the data and the information he get into books and into papers like academics do, and with that create what we kind of call a thought process that gets into material other people can read, and then it's a good book, and you can use it for teaching systems if you like. If anybody wanted to, they could use his books in a different type of human history that eventually perhaps will be part of the universities. I think that's part of his program, that was what it was supposed to be. We're just waiting for that moment when that will become on the program of universities, extraterrestrial origin, different types of clandestine projects within human as part of history, known history. So it gets accepted history that this has happened, that we already had crafts back in the 30s, that whatever came with Project Paperclip led to that understanding that Nazis were already working with extraterrestrials, etc., as part of known history, instead of being this fringe, outlandish thing that people are talking about. So that's kind of, if you want to go with what we call an academic version of history, that's Richard Dolan. Then we go to the ER doctor that is on the spot, ready to work and are pushing himself full in, head on, strong in, going in, finding solutions. So you're seeing two different ways of working with things. And that's important when we talk about the information they're bringing forth, because the messengers are two different personalities. They're good people, both of them. It's nothing to do with them. It's not about good or bad or whether doing or not doing or whatever. We are all different people that are looking into different aspects of this very, very complex pattern of human history that is now being revealed. And I know I'm just blasting through this because this is not what I wanted to go, but this is background so you understand that when you listen to a person, always be aware of the person's background. What is the information for? What is the message? What is it that that person is trying to convey? And what does it lead to? Does it lead to any kind of pattern that fits into society as we know of it? Or is it kind of what we call more outlandish and belong to what we could call more the psychological realm? Or is it the technological realm? What are we looking for? So that's where we begin to train ourselves in proficiency within specific areas of expertise. That is a significant key when you talk about extraterrestrials and interdimensionals. They are always locked into a specific type of work. And I recall from my otherworldly existences the exact same thing. So that's why I can say that is important for us to understand. When we talk about inside the different projects that we're working in different realities, it's always cross-disciplinary. And that means we work within the different pillars that is ours to work with, where we develop different kind of consciousness potentials that leads to specific outcomes. But it's always cross-disciplinary. It's always sharing across the other pillars of what we know in different meetups and in different councils and onward and so forth. So it's not never just one person like a crazy scientist that do something on his or her own. That is something that is unique here, that you kind of have the first of many, and the first of many never really gets further than just being the one that is doing it and then being ridiculed and all these kind of things. That's part of the dynamics of keeping us in oblivion. Okay. So with that understood, when I, first and foremost, the other thing that I want to say here with Stephen Grier is that whenever I look into, I always get a mantid in my field. And I want to go a little bit down that path. It's not hostile. It's just coming up and say so far, no further. And that means that's a protection. And that's okay. I don't need to go any further. It's about his information anyways. If I look into, okay, where have I seen mantids in other inner experiences? Because it's all in my head, right? But it's so elaborate and so detailed and so as if I was really there, which I most likely have been in different versions of myself, either in this life or previous lifetimes or in alternate realities or whatever it is. Again, this is very complex. And for those of you who are not in this ball game, this is a big mouthful. But bear in mind, I've been part of this my entire life. So for me, this is just normal. This is everyday business. And I'm just trying to find head and tail in it so that my part of the disclosure project, which we are doing to get to 2029, is to have the expanded psychological awareness of what's going on, and at the same time also looking at the dynamics, the psychodynamics of the expanded awareness into an advanced civilization and a vast cosmos where civilizations exist that are just as complex as ours, just as spread out between good and evil as our civilization is. We can't talk in absolutes here. We can't say that humans are this and they are that and this kind. That's childish. That's the 5-year-old that only knows black and white. And we must go not into gray, no, because that's just denial and modeling it all. No, we need to go into the full spectrum of actually seeing things as they truly are. So let's get beyond the dichotomies and the absolutes, and this is this and this and that, and then understand scientifically. When you look into different aspects of the multidimensional reality field we are part of, you have to log in on a specific locality and investigate that within its own perimeter. And that's focused log-on consciousness where we do that. And I do that now with some of the information that Stephen Grier is presenting. And I do that because I have listened to him for many years, but I have always had this kind of cloaking or lenses on when I was listening to it. Plus the mantle that used to be there is getting older and it's not as strong. And it's kind of, I have changed and perhaps I'm not seen as the same type of threat. Why would I be perceived as a threat? Okay, when I was in Australia, I was naive and trusting, and people, there are so many good people, and I got involved with some people I really cared about, and some of them are still in my life. And highly regarded, and it had nothing to do with them as people, but it has all to do with the projects that people are a part of. And this is another distinction that is super difficult for most people to grasp, that you can have the nicest person on the planet, and then he or she is part of some really, really nasty faction that uses that front to get access to those of us who are in some of the other programs. And that's, I'm not saying that any of these people that I'm talking about here is that, but on a general level. And that makes it very, very difficult, especially with me that work with people. You have people that come and really want your help because their life is a nightmare and they don't understand it because they're kind people and they're good people and they're doing good things, but their life is a nightmare. And that's because they're woven into some of these experimental projects that are going on with the different type of genetics that we have. And that's a bummer. That makes it very difficult. It is very, very difficult when you're dealing with that group within humanity. It's easier when you're dealing with someone who's a really bleh person, and then you can see the falling angelic behind you. Now I get it. Yeah, at least I know what it is. And then you just have that direct confrontation with the falling angelic behind, and then just know, yeah, that's just what it is. And then that makes it so much easier. The other one where you have actually one of the original civilizations of our solar system, that you know, this is a person I used to know, and then you can see they're being completely compromised and they're fully not aware of it. They're completely unaware of it, how corrupted they are on the higher order fields. That's difficult because you can't tell it to them. You can't tell that that's what it is, but you are being influenced by it and you're being attacked by whatever is in the higher levels of their fields from the other dimensions. That's the interdimensional, intradimensional aspect of the awakening process that very few are aware of because they have not been succumb to it. We have talked about energetic parasites and energetic vampires and all of these kind of things, and we always associate it with the person. And then it's easy because that person is typically someone who's a little bit obnoxious, and then it's easy to say, oh yeah, I get that, that's one of these semi-depressive energetic vampires, and then you just avoid them or whatever it is. And we kind of know that. But we're getting into the next level of the game where things are much more complex, where we're going to see that people we trust might have something higher up in their fields that makes it difficult for us to be around them. And then there's the whole, how are we going to deal with this? Are we going to take the struggle? We can definitely do that if the person we are involved with knows about these things. Then we are on the same page. If the other person doesn't know of it and is in a completely oblivion, then you can't push. Remember, I'm a psychotherapist. You can't push people to revelations of their inner core if they're not ready for it. They have to be ready for it. And humanity at large is not ready for what this game is about. And that's where the few of us that are ready, we need to look at each other's material and get pieces of the information from the different sectors that are being investigated into the pieces that we have so we can create a whole. This is not about taking their material, but it's adding in the gaps that I have some of, but I don't have the full extent of. There was an attempt to pull me in 2017 to some of these projects in America. And I'm going back to Australia again. In America, where through some of the students that came to me and in the template reading, I got access to some of these projects that they were part of. I have shared some of this in Modern History. As I was working with that, including some of the people in Australia, I got sucked more and more into these black projects that are utilizing humans for all sorts of experiments that are horrible. That's some of the reasons why I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing today, because I got sucked into some of these projects, which if I had known, I would have had the door closed and never looked into. So I have my own experiences, again, as visions, as clairvoyance, as remote viewing, as participating because I was dragged in and not willingly choosing to do so, seeing some of these technologies, including when I went to Australia, some of the projects under the different insectoid groups that have on their top mantids. The top of the insectoid hierarchy has mantids that are controlling them in the fourth dimension. But if you go beyond, then in the fifth, they typically have dark Atlanteans, some of the falling angelic groups, and even further up, they might have other groups that they are colluding with. So everybody in a hierarchy has someone that is above them that is controlling them within the what we call regressed and fallen hierarchies of civilizations. It's a kind of it's a world of tyranny that they come from. This does not make our hearts bleed and be all compassionate, because as with all tyrannies, whoever is part of it either choose to be part of it, or if they don't like it, they can go somewhere else, which is part of the very vast and extended migrations we had after the timeline event into different sectors where different groups were joining together to avoid some of the more fallen jurisdictions that had come under control of some really nasty forces. And they exist. We must not be blue-eyed here, as we said in Danish. We must not be naive. And that goes with why I have a little bit of hiccup sometimes when Stephen Grier is talking about his experience. They're from 1994. We had benevolence in 1994. We don't have many benevolence anymore. So keep saying out there that there are benevolence. That's true. But they are just so far, far away from us right now because of what's going on in our world and because things have changed since 2017 when we got connected to the dark galactic core. Our sun is changing and transforming. Our whole solar system is changing and transforming. So we are not in that situation where back then, and that's where you can be stuck with what you are and what you're working with, because you become so proficient in it that you stop seeing the other angles that are also there. And same with me. I'm still stuck. I'm trying to work my way through it, and this is why I'm doing this as a giving over, so I can let it go and then make room for something else, something kind of new that I would prefer to work more with this that goes back to my life in Australia, that is part of the main timeline, and I'm trying to claw my way out into the subsidiary timeline I talk about in the 2029 material. So that's part of why I'm doing this. It's not because I'm giving this and then I'm going into a niche where I'm working with this and people can come to me and we can have large conversation. This is me telling what I know, and then I just want to shut the door. I just want to get out of it. Just leave me alone. So it's not that funny. It's horrible, it's disgusting, it sucks, it's a project, it's an experiment I don't want to be part of anymore. I don't want to be part of it anymore. You have 5-year-old and me yelling because it's too much, it's overwhelming, it's just too horrible. And when you look at the Close Encounters of a Fifth Kind, Stephen Grier's break into tears because people die of this. It's not for fun. This experiment, what's going on here is absolutely horrible and dangerous, and on all levels of whomever and whatever is doing whatever they're doing, those of us who are part of these projects, it's a daily nightmare that becomes the new normal, which is horrible in itself. That's part of the project they're doing with us humans. How far can they push us? Who can they give information? Who can awaken? Who can awaken on their own? Who can they artificially awaken? What can they awaken them into? How can they tamper with the human genome? How can they tamper with the human consciousness? How can they tamper with us so we fit their projects and what they want to do with humanity? Because humanity, and sorry here, that's my anger, does not get out of there and do what they're supposed to do. Anyways, I know that too. Then I go back into my kind, compassionate side and say, I know that too. As a psychotherapist, I know why. It is absolutely, would I choose to do what I'm doing? Not in any world would I say yes to any of it. But I was lured and tricked into the activation processes. It was always this kind of went through a month. And then at the end of the month, I would always hear in my head, do you want to continue? And then it was just kind of, oh yeah, this is super exciting. Yes, I want to continue. Now when they're saying, do you want to continue? No, I just want to get out of it. Nobody listens anymore because now I become an asset. And that's when you see with these that are in these projects. Once you're in, you're never out. And that goes for the Black projects, and that goes for those who've been working with the retrievals, the legacy programs, and all of these things. Once you're in, you're always in. You are literally forced into silence. Some of these, what do you call it? There is a specific American word, I forgot about it, where they're not allowed to say anything. Last for, I think Stephen Grier said 80 years or something. And that's why some of them come out when they are old. And why does it then become declassified, and why is it allowed to talk about? Because these programs no longer exist. And the same goes here. What I'm talking about now no longer exists. But there are other versions of this, because those of us who've been in the earlier programs, we're just being pushed into the new programs if we have the ability to adapt, which I unfortunately am genetically prone to complete adaptation because of my original composition, which drags me from one program to another, to another, to another. And the times my body has caved in and has been revived is literally, I don't need a near-death experience. When they were really running this hard, I almost died on a daily basis. My body said, I'm dying now. And I'm saying, yes, I can feel you dying. And then I went into a deep theta state where I was doing all of the near-death experiences. And then I would come back and my body had been recalibrated and put back together so they could continue whatever they're doing. These groups, extraterrestrials and human alike, have the ability to work with the human body to the brink of death and bring it back again, which we're doing inside the normal ER, CPR. Remember? We bring back people too. So we have made it a norm that that's what we want to do because we're so afraid of death. And I'm just kind of, let me move on, please. But I know I'm entangled in all of this, so I need to work my way through again why we're doing this, because Stephen Grier said survivor's guilt. That's perhaps the male mind that goes into that one. I'm in this weird. I'm doing this because there's something in me just feels it's so unfair. It's very childish, but that's my driver. That's what drives me, not survivor's guilt. I would love not to survive. I would prefer not to survive, so I don't have that. I don't have this huge I need to survive, because I remember my past lives. I have so many past lives and I died so many times and I'm still here. So I'm not afraid of death whatsoever. And I know what goes beyond, as I said, my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother, and releasing other people that are sticking around when they shed off their physical form. In America, I did so much crossing over from family members and whatnot. So it's just, that's my everyday. It's so normal. So they can't intimidate me with death. Not anymore. Plus my body is just kind of, oh yeah, now that's a new, oh yeah, now we die again. So that's what happens. That's what the human body does. The human psyche, that's in itself is quite amazing. And that's why they keep running these projects on us. But what then I had the whole psychological breakdown, build up, breakdown, build up, breakdown, build up, and getting out of the trauma of that, which has been some of the more severe work, getting out of the trauma of some of these experiences and get to the point where I actually can see what they're doing when they're at the end of the month are doing horrible stuff with my clones that ripples into me. It's no fun to feel your head get ripped up and you are being to death and all of these kind of things. It's very, very unpleasant by beings that you're looking at and saying these are horrible, demonic looking creatures. You know they're reptile of origin. You know they are a kind of biological hybrid project engineered to do that. And that's their only function, like killing machines that are at the same time highly perverted and sadistic. And then you're part of that program is saying, what am I doing here? Or some of my friends that are part of the underworld programs that every night get dragged into the underworld and get pushed out. That's some of the experiences I had in Australia, where I got dragged into the underworld and where I had one of these underworld creatures saying, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. That's not your program. So it's ridiculous, but it has a humongous effect on the human psyche. That's the experimentation. And I can laugh about it now because I am not so heavily, I just had 3 days that were very unpleasant, but I'm learning to cope like everything else. Once you work through the trauma of the different things I've experienced, then you have passed the program and then you move on to the next. And they call it initiations into what it actually means to have multidimensional awareness, because the world out there is just as scary as this world can be, and it's just as hard as this world is. So we can't fly away in a dream of the benevolence that they will come, and just because we're in contact with them, then our life gets so much better. I have been in contact with some of the interdimensionals. They keep themselves hidden most of the time. There are still some of the, we call fairy grays, that are also there. There are some of the nature beings that still are out there from the astral plane you can get in contact with. I do that from time to time. And it's so nice to feel that kindness when you most of the time are woven into all of this sadistic, perverted, screwed up mentality of the groups that are controlling our planet. And that makes it very, very difficult to keep your head above water. And within all of these factions, as some of the latest information from Stephen Grier, from the really dark black projects, and I'm going to call them dark black project because they're black because they're not out there in the open, and they're also dark because they're sinister and horrible and disgusting, and they're running for this one government militaristic angle, which I'm fully aware of. I have been in contact with some of these groups. I try to get as quickly out as I can as possible. But this group is part of the cross of stagnation that is now coming into control of the matter and greed races that are now running amok on our planet, as we saw 100 years ago. So they're back in the game. And with that, we need to acknowledge that that's a fact. And that's where Stephen Grier can come in with some good information, because last time they were in check, they brought in new type of weaponry and new type of machines, the tanks, whatever, which we saw the Nazis were developing. This time around, they're going to come with the reversed engineered technologies, and that's what they've been working with. So they sprung out of the early Nazi projects because it's the same soul group, now just 100 years later in their new forms, doing exactly what they have been done throughout the course of time, and you can go back in history and find them. They have a 100-year cycle where they keep coming back and creating disaster inside this reality field, and then it's seen as a crisis, as a cleanup process from where humanity can make their great leap, whatever it is, going back to the plague or whatever it is that changes the surface of our planet as well as our societal structures. So they are there as the hammer of evil that teaches us what goodness is. And I'm just saying, bleh, I don't buy into that model. Sorry for me being so out forward and outspoken here. We don't need crisis to change. And that's the white hat that goes, you see, within these factions, there are the ones that are really believing in it, and then there are the ones that get sucked in, and then they learn, this is not good, and then they become whistleblowers, and they become part of the faction that either works within it as white hats or outside of it. And that goes back to the Manted. So with all of that explanation, that Manted that is part of Stephen Grier is one of the ones that have segregated itself from the military projects, and by that are protecting him, and at the same time also pointing him in the direction that he needs to go to find evidence of these projects. I've been pulled in when I was in Australia, where the typical layout in the science lab, in the chair, I am in some kind of drugged state. I can barely look out my eyes. I had a recurring dream of that as a child too. Very unpleasant. Running away from two men in black in my dream in the 70s. We didn't even have that in Denmark. Anyways, you can do it in dreams too. You don't have to do it in reality. You can do a lot of stuff in dreams that has the exact same thing in the psyche, because as MK Ultra and all the other projects figure it out, you don't need to be awake. You don't really need to experience it. You can do a lot of stuff while people are sleeping. That's very easy to do, especially if you can create it kind of a dream state. You know how impacted you get by dreams? So of course, you can do a lot with the human mind when people are sleeping. And that's my issue. It's not everyday business. It's when I go to sleep. And unfortunately, my body needs sleep. So I have to go to sleep. And then I wake up. And if I say, I don't want to sleep, then they make me so super tired, I fall asleep anyways. This technology that is playing on this planet is beyond what people are aware of. That's the real big scare, that they're afraid of us to really know how elaborate and how outlandish this is. And Stephen Grier actually said that when he began this work, one of the ones, the whistleblowers, or one of the witnesses that came to him, he said, well, when you really get into the depth of what it is, the truth is so outlandish. That's not his word, but I'm paraphrasing. The truth is so outlandish that it annihilates itself. And that's when I'm saying this, just by saying this, people say, what have you had in your morning coffee, Randi Green? Right? So that's why it can be kept a secret, because those of us who are part of it, we carry this burden for a very, very long time until we feel this I just need to share it. But that's when it's over. And then we share all of this and people say, wow, whoa, that's unpleasant feel for us, but they're not experiencing it. So it's just like a child that grows up in a hugely abusive family and comes out and share that with others that have not lived in these hugely abusive families, but come from a kind of okay, normal family. And that person, especially if it's a psychologist or just a friend or whatever, will look at the other one and say, I hear what you're saying. I hear your truth. I hear what you're trying to explain, but they have no understanding of it. The friend, the psychologist, whatever, they're just sitting there completely baffled, doesn't know what to do with it because it's not part of their worldview. So that's just kind of, I don't know what it is because I haven't experienced it, and we can't yell at them and say, why don't you respond better? Why are you not seeing me, hearing me, acknowledging me? Because they don't understand. They haven't experienced it, so we can't ask of them to understand what it is, and they can only respond with the tools they have for psychological trauma in general, for different types of other types of experiences that outside the norm, and then just try to help out to the best of our abilities. But at the back of their head, they're thinking, what kind of illness am I dealing with here? And that's the issue with those of us who are part of these projects. That's why we're not coming forth, even within now when we are having the UAPs and everybody's saying, oh yeah, UFOs are real for finally in 80 years, right? Then it's finally out there because there is a faction that wants to control the narrative and put it out there and say, now we can accept that the general population knows it's there because we need people to know it's there. They control the narrative. Before they didn't want us to know, so we said it wasn't there. And now they want us to know, so everybody says, now it's there. We're being controlled like little sheeple. Okay, so with that, even though that's there, we still hear these people that are saying, yes, UAPs are real. But alien abductions? No. And if it is, as Stephen Grier says, then it's man-made. And I agree, a lot of it is man-made. And yes, these groups can, and that's why I go back to Australia, me in the chair, and the man said. And there were two science technicians, I would call them doctors, lack of better words, that were administering the drugs, that were administering what was going on, who can work in these projects physically, actively. And then I look at them saying, oh yeah, they're enhanced, they're not fully humans, and then it makes sense, because if it were the humans like you and me, I would not say yes to a job like that. But I also know, however far we can trust Bob Lazar's information, because there's a little bit insecurity. Some of it is real, some of it is not. Whatever, we don't know, we can't prove it. He has been discredited for, and this is the problem. When first people get discredited, it's difficult to really kind of, what they say is actually true. Where Stephen Grier is lucky, he has not been discredited generally. And as even Stephen Grier says, well, Bob Lazar comes out with a lot of good information, but due to some of the things, some of the choices he made in the past, he has a background that makes us unable to use him. You see, this is part of this game too, that if you can't take people out, because Bob Lazar, they made him a non-person by erasing him literally on all levels of reality, taking away all the trails of what he's done and did not do, so he became a kind of a person with no background. Then the other thing they can do is that they can lure people into being part of different stupid things they shouldn't have been part of. And then it's easy to discredit because of that, because of we call it the law of association, because of whom you have been around. And that's where I went back to with some of the issues of why this mantis doesn't trust me, because I got into what we could say projects in Australia that I shouldn't have been part of, that gave me this, oh yeah, you've been in that group, so now we can't really trust you. Because once you've been in these different groups, then these groups can always access through you to where you're going. You are being compromised. And that's because these groups, they can work with genetics and consciousness and imprinting and advanced technology that can, at the moment you've been in contact with something, you have the imprint of it. Simple as that, energetically speaking. Anyways, Balthazar tells that whenever he had been in some specific type of program, they would erase his memories afterwards using different types of drugs. And I have no doubt that that's probably what's going on. He's suffering from migraine and whatever now. So anyways, not to go into Balthazar, I'm just saying, piecing all of this together, you get a picture that kind of adds up, and you begin to understand what these projects are about. And as I said, this is not because it's new for me. I'm seeking confirmation, because my own experience is this kind of, I observed firsthand in my own life how they can cloak things, how they can manipulate the mind, how they can create overlays, how they can make you forget things, how they can step into other people that you care about, how they can eradicate the people you do care about and change it with something else, how they can pull the soul out, put something in, etc., etc., etc. The technology here is beyond what we understand as normal science, because once you work with multidimensional aspect and you understand we're multidimensional creatures, then it's no difficulty to understand that you can work with what a human is on the other levels, and that will change the outer domain outcome, because this, what you manifest here, has 12 other layers before that, and change some of the other layers, then you will change the product. It is as simple as that. Okay, so going back to the mantis and that thing it was not the friend I was living with, it was a child that was the issue. That child was part of a program, that some of the programs that run in Australia, and that's a whole other story I will share at another point, where I was shown some of these programs with some of the children, and that was unfortunate. She had a friend that was part of a different mantis faction that calls himself the Golden Orb and produces the Golden Orbed hybrid children. That faction later on fell into the hands of some of the dark forces, and the child changed accordingly, and that was why things were combined with the other child. Anyways, it gets too personal, so I can't really talk about it, so I won't. I'm just saying that that's where you live with a friend, and before you know it, because there's a child that is part of some of these factions, then before you know it, you're suddenly, due to the law of association, been in contact with factions you shouldn't be in contact with. Or on the street, you can just stand on the train station and you come across a falling angelic, and then you get the imprint of that. And if there is a purpose of that, well, then they have the imprint, and then they can access you, and technology and amplification and blah, blah, blah. So it's this game, people. That's a very, very, very advanced game. And that's what whenever people say, well, it's just due to religion, it will be too much of kind of a wake-up call. Yeah, that could very well be. But it could also be that this is just a cloak story for the real levels of this, which those of us who are part of this program are being experimented with. How much can the human mind actually take before it breaks down and goes insane? We have seen people getting insane, having prior in history, so it's not new. It's been going on, but this is where it becomes this critical point where they want to put this technology in, and to be able to put this technology in, they also need a worldview that accommodates that and that are fitting into that glove of the worldview they need us to have, so they can lease out and release all of this technology and come up with all of what they know and then get amnesty. So you're seeing this narrative that is being played out. Okay, so in Australia, being pulled in meditation, seeing myself in a chair, and this is where again my nose get clogged, which is interesting. 2 seconds. Which is so interesting because that's another energetic side effect of doing some of these talks, is that I always get physical reactions to it as a kind of a cleanse out process, because I go up in energy, and another just throwing something in right now. When I go out there, go outside, I have a lot of physical responses to it. So I think it's overcast most of the time here in Denmark. I think they are running some really sinister projects right now due to human alteration and genetic manipulation from chemtrailing. Anyways, I'm just putting it in there. So that's speculation. I can't prove it. As always, I can't prove any of this because it's all in my head, right? So that's why I say Stephen Grier's a little lucky. He's got a paper trail. He's got witnesses. He has got people who have had hands-on. And yes, I had my own, I got my 3 experiences, 4 actually, where both saw the lights in the sky that got more brighter, and then they pull back, kind of the false stars that are there, then becomes more bright, and then they kind of subside. I had these 2 things where I was pulled out and put back in. I will talk more about that because I think there's more to that I would like to explore by talking about it. And then I saw that very, very large craft in Australia, that humongous white sphere that came out of the clouds for 2 split seconds. Or actually perhaps 10 seconds, or enough for me to really grasp it's there. I'm looking at it. It's there physically manifested. And then when I began to want to shout and talk about it, then it retracted. And all of this, the things that white sphere that was a mothership of some sort, not just a little jolt or a little scout craft. It was one of the very big ships that they chose to manifest for whatever reason that was. All of the other stuff is done remote viewing, clairvoyantly, when they choose to come very close in the 4th dimension, but not really physical, just the stage before physicality. So you sense it, you feel it. It's kind of, you can also put your hand on it, you can touch it. They can make you have sensations of that they are there as you feel a hand on the shoulder or sharp pain or whatever, but they're not physically manifested enough so that you can actually, because they become vulnerable. Once they get into matter form, they're vulnerable, as we're seeing with some of the crafts they can take down. The moment they become quote unquote 3-dimensional or in alignment with the electromagnetic energy, then we have electromagnetic weapon that can take them out. Okay, so the chair, 2 scientists, doctors, whatever they were, not really human, and then 1 soldier in this black uniform we have heard of so many times. Enhanced human for sure, phasing in and out of kind of reptilian genetic composition into a human thing. So we have a lot of these weird hybrids in these programs. And then the mantid. And the mantid was deliberately keeping me awake. And the reason why I even got dragged in there was because that kid that had a mantid, and he came and the kid physically approached me, asked me to stretch out my hand, and then he gave me a golden orb that was in the 4th dimension. It was not physical, it was not to be seen with our eyes, but he could see it and I could see it, because these golden orb children, they are telepathic and are able to show us things that we want to show in those of us who have the capacity to see it. So he gave me this golden energy, and it went from my left hand and into my spine, and then become part of my central nervous system and my entire field. And with that, they could pull me in. I accepted. Psst. Yeah. Anyway, so I was pulled into that project that he came from, this Golden Orb project, that are the human front of some of these military projects. And once you get into that, they have you. So that's part of some of the scavenger projects I've been thrown at the end of the month, because once they were done with me, they handed over that blueprint to some other group that then have exploited it for whatever entertainment that is. Because some of these groups that are within the factions of the falling angelics, as well as the regressed and the scavengers and the Dracos and whatever's left of all of these groups of insectoids in the 4th dimension, not many, but some of them are left. They are colluding with these groups, the scavengers, as I call them, because they can give them stuff that they normally can't retrieve themselves, but at the same time they have to feed them off, so to speak, with something that keeps them busy and entertain them so they don't run amok, instead of just literally. Anyways, this is, you know how it works. Look at the mafia. You have the one in top, and then they have all of the foot soldiers that are doing stupid stuff that they can't really control, but they need that kind of brutality. Otherwise, they can't do what they need to do to scare people off. So they need to have them to keep those of us who are in these programs in check, or whatever that is, doing horrible stuff that normal people wouldn't do, and other both interdimensional or extraterrestrials wouldn't do, because that would produce a kind of reciprocity into their holographic energy system, which we call karma, that has an effect that leads to deterioration of their consciousness potential. So they either use androids or others to do so, and then they have this kind of barrier going between different groups, of which the mantids are not affected to the same degree due to the exoskeleton and the way they are built up, as some of the other groups are influenced by being in contact with some of these horrible scavenger species. So you're beginning to see this is complex. And this is all what I've got from these experiences I've had, because the mantid that was keeping me awake was showing me about this facility. It's in my mind, and I haven't got any words for it. And that's why I sometimes scout for other people that are talking about this. No, it's not the New Mexico Dulce base kind of thing. That one, it feels manipulated, and there's so much cloaking around it, so I can't really use that information. Some of it's true, some of it's not. Some of the facilities they talk about, that they explain in the Dulce bases with these huge tubes of hybrids they're producing. I've seen that too in some of the projects. So I have things in my head, but I haven't got the location of it. I can't say it belongs to that faction or that faction, because you're only, how am I to know what faction the mantid is to if it doesn't reveal to me telepathically, if it doesn't brief me what it is and what's going on? If I'm just seeing it, then I can only see, I saw this, but I can only speculate what it is, because it's not clear. I didn't get the information. I was in an elaborate conversation with a mantid. I could ask, who and what are you? And then it would show me military projects. And then it would show me its position. It would call itself a general. And it would be there. And it was kind of orchestrating these programs. And it was an intermediary between this and other programs, etc., etc. And I could see in the way the energies was around it that was part of what we call the falling angelics. It was part of the groups that were beginning the revertedness of its consciousness potential into what we call service to self. And then we can see the mantid that I see around Stephen Grier has broken free of these factions, because these factions work with the human operators inside these clandestine projects. Now you get the full round of that, where that is and why it sees me with suspicion, because I've been in contact with the group it has broken away from. This is where we get when we're talking about higher order societies and worlds and advanced civilizations. We're talking about energetic realities where everything you do has an impact. Everything you think has an impact. Everything you feel has an impact. And that means whatever you come in contact with will become an access point for what you have been in contact with. And that's why I often say, sometimes it's better to turn the other cheek and literally not get invested or look into it, because that's the law of participation. I talk about the principles and the laws and the rules and these choices of life in the transition sciences, the template sciences, and reconfiguration sciences. So going back to, I know this is a lot of information to take in and a lot of things that are coming up. And where did I want to go with this other than just sharing? Right now, I got a bulk of information that has now come into a pattern, and I'm now revealing that pattern and saying, what's the takeaway here? The takeaway here is that the reality of these programs and what's going on here is far more fringe than anyone could ever experience. That there are selected groups within humanity that are part of projects where we are being tampered with to explore how far they can push the quote-unquote activation process of humanity into higher order societies in whatever faction that is running their projects here. That's the end game for all of the groups that are here, the externalization and the revealing of who and what they are. Some wants to reveal who and what they are as the Black Project, militaristic, Altair, and Taurus factions that goes with the Stagnant Cross, that goes back to Nazi Germany, and that group that is an externalization of groups we have had in earlier times throughout history. Every 100 years they come back in as a sick kind of cycle that needs to repair but can't repair because it refuses to be healed and repaired, and by that plays out its old nasty tricks every time it comes back, which is doing again. That faction wants one world government structure, and they're trying every time to build up to that degree where humans will give over what's left of their liberty to these groups so they can control the world, and by that get the entire planetary system from where human operators are collaborating with them. But these human operators are enhanced humans, and they are on their soul level, not what we understand as human soul. They are from other schemes of our reality, interdimensional souls that have been dumped here, and every 100 years they get a chance to undo what they have done in the past, and every time they choose what they always done. They go for war and disaster and destruction. You can call this stagnant cross if you like, the Four Horsemen. Okay, so they come every 100 years, and we're in that phase right now. So that means the rest of us that are part of the other programs under the white hats that have broken away, that have learned their lesson, that are trying to redeem themselves, that are still trying to rehabilitate themselves, but doesn't really know how to do that because they are doing it for so long, and they're still under some level of control, and their genetics are not fully as they're supposed to be, and their mindset is service to self, and all of these kind of things. And that's the scale we have of all of the other groups that are there into what we call truly benevolent. But they don't want to touch us. They don't want to be in contact with us because I said, everything you come in contact with leaves an imprint, and that imprint is a door into your energy system from what you've been in contact with. If I'm in contact with a benevolent, and that benevolent manifests itself in my field to be in contact, telepathic contact, whether it's an orb or it's an actual representation, or it's just a kind of a thought that touches my mind and then gives a line of communication, then that's an imprint. And then I can just think about that quote unquote benevolent I've been in contact with, and then I can access, remote view it at any time. Even if I'm in this most horrible scenario, I can reach out, and then it will get in contact with levels of a reality that will then have a huge impact on their reality. So of course they're not opening the door. I get that. Goes without saying. I wouldn't go into a part of our reality that was highly contagious. Of course not. So that's part of what we must understand as well. But they are there, and we can grow our way out of what we are and get reconnected to some of the timelines. That's the subsidiary timeline, where we can work our way through the different layers and do the cleansing process. And that's part of my work to show how that's possible. But the game we're in and the mess that we are in are on all levels trying to prevent us from doing so. And while that is happening, then we are part of these guinea pig projects of the externalization of the extraterrestrial agenda, as well as the interdimensional agenda, as well as the clandestine agenda, as well as the black projects, as well as the negative groups within society, as well as some of the old souls, as well as some of the souls that go back to Mesopotamia and other places than the underworld and what have you. And it's just very complex. And those of us who are in the middle of that, we're the guinea pigs to see how far can they push this. How much will they adapt us into understand what's going on? And what I was just thinking this morning, that perhaps that's part of what the drones are about. They're kind of, first people are all kind of, and the longer the drones are there, humans will be desensitized to them. They will then become part of the new normal. Oh yeah, we've got drones in the sky. They've been there for a long time. We don't know what it is, but they've been there. That's the normal human behavior. And I think that's why they're just prolonging it and prolonging it and prolonging it, because that's what humans do. In the beginning, they're all over the place, crawling up and down the walls. Eventually, just looking up, yeah, it's just a drone. Once that we've done that, they go into the next phase. And that's the one where I kind of say, okay, is it, as Stephen Grier says, that's the one world government agenda that they're trying to roll out? Or is it extraterrestrials that are trying to do an externalization under the 2029? Either you come clean or we do it and show that we are here, because we're tired of showing ourselves and nobody pays attention and nobody's actually saying there are extraterrestrials. And this is about where you get to the point where everybody acknowledges there, and we'll keep the drones up there until you get what it is. And then we have the counter drones from the clandestine projects that doesn't want that to happen, and all the things that are going on at the same time that makes it very confusing, etc., etc. So I'm just putting it that way because I've gone on to all sorts of explanations and speculations, and I'm not doing that. But that thought just dawned on me this morning, how humans eventually adapt to the extremes that they are put into. We see that again and again and again. And the trauma of some of the groups that have been here in part of the old world order and going into some of the projects that are also fizzling out, except that, as I talked about, some of the ones that are involved with the Scavengers and some of these projects, the military projects, they still have a little bit of a leftover to deal with. And as long as these scavengers and these horrible beings are there and doing what they're doing to keep us still low vibrant and taking away our energy potentials, I don't think that group of Greys, including other groups within the clandestine projects, they can come forth. Of course not. Yes, we accept many things, but overall speaking, that's unacceptable. Completely unacceptable and completely unforgivable. And the only thing they can do is that if they are to come clean and if they are going to present themselves, step one, get rid of all these projects, shut them down, get rid of the scavengers. They are hybrid race. They're not real beings anyways. It's a kind of technology. Get rid of it. Allow humanity to grow into their activation potentials, those of us who have been part of these test groups. Let us run free now, please, instead of keep pushing us into these programs so they take away the surplus of what we have built up during the month, because that's what they're doing. Let us have what's ours. So we actually can have groups within humanity that has activated and are on the same level as they are. And then we can have an open discussion with all the implications of their actions. And by that come to some kind of conclusion of what's the right approach right here. What's the right approach for these Greys that have been part of this project, that have been dumped here, that are now running on their own, that were part of the original projects, etc., etc. What's their purpose now? Can they be repurposed, so to speak? Can they find another level where they go back to maintain nature and lower life forms without exploiting them and using them for their own desires and needs and traits and whatnot? So there's a whole, it's like taking the mob or the mafia and rehabilitate all the members of it. That's what we're dealing with here. So that's where I come in as in kind of, yes, first we have humans on a grand scale that needs to adapt that this is actually real. But when we come to these groups, their rehabilitation and being included back into society, being there's a specific word you call it, getting back into society, are criminals. Can we rehabilitate them? Is it possible to rehabilitate them? Should we rehabilitate them? What are the best approaches here? And with that, I would also say that humans on a large scale probably won't be able to really make the proper decisions due to the technology and mind control technology they have access to. So we need some higher organ or institution that comes from outside to assist us in that kind of counsel that must be taken on these rogue groups and what to do with them. And that's where I see the big issues, because where are these councils? Since they're part of, quote unquote, the benevolence, right? And they don't want to get in contact with this reality. Even in holographic meetups, they have very little de facto power inside this reality because it's become so dissimilar. And that's the issue. So there's only, as Stephen Grier also says, there's only one group left that can make any change. And that's those of us who are in the know. We're the ones that can make this change. It's not little Peter down the corner that doesn't know anything. It's not the psychologist that doesn't know anything, haven't had any experiences herself or himself. It's about all the scientist that doesn't know and are stuck in his or her paradigm. It's about those of us who know. We need to find ways to get beyond our trauma, and not just to whistleblow. That's just part of it, coming clean with the stories. That's what I'm doing here, and putting it all in context as I experience it. And then people can say it is what it is or whatever, believe it or not. If it doesn't align with their experiences, I'm not expecting people to believe it, because if they don't have any predisposition for this kind of knowledge, they won't understand it. They will hear it. It will be interesting. They'll forget it in 2 split seconds, because the human mind does that. It prunes out information that is not part of the comfort zone. So we are a very small group that can do this. And to be able to do this, we need to work our way through all of these horror programs to get to the point where we're on the other side and then actually say, I made it through the 4th dimension and I'm now no longer to the degree possible afflicted by to the same degree I was prior, that kind of, as I've just been through a process the last 2 years where I just felt I was in the corner and I got balls thrown at me, actually in the last 5 years, in a corner, just already beaten up, already completely squashed out into nothingness, being bombarded with all sorts of psychotronic nightmare visions and experiences and what have you. And then life at the same time just threw one ball after another on me and again and pushed me into all sorts of work that was horrible and just left my body completely falling apart. Extreme pains every day, psychological pain, physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain, pain on all levels. So this game, to get through the different layers, to get to the point where we actually can connect to our higher order awareness, is absolutely a path of horrors from A to Z. And at the same time, all of the obstacles that are going on with the world as it is. So if you ask me, why do I keep going? Why do I keep doing this? Because at some point when you're in the middle of some very horrible nightmare, you just want to get out of it. But if you understand that even though you wake up, it's still going on, then you say to yourself, well, how do I actually get out of it? What is needed here? And that's why the scientific mind comes in over the religious mind and the believer mind, the worshipper mind. Because the worshipper, the believer, they just begin to pray. And we know, we've seen that plenty of times. When we talk about extraterrestrial technology, you can pray as much as you like. You can make as many bubbles of energy around you. But that doesn't help, because this is technology. Shield yourself from a huge tractor that is running down the road and in your path, and you are shielding yourself with energy because you believe that if I just shield myself with a white bubble, then I won't get hurt. Duh. It's physical. It's not energetic. And that's some of these technology we're talking about as well. We might not see them, but they're still physical. Okay, so that was a bit of a mouthful here today on December 27th. But I will leave it at that. And that's part of my disclosure. That's what I can contribute with, aside from all of the teachings I've given, so that people can work and clean and get the knowledge of how to actually administer their own energy field and consciousness potentials. And that learning journey is years of work. It's not done over a weekend. That is a lifetimes of work, and that's why I call it a higher awareness lifestyle. The HAL Academy, it's about a new way of being human. It's not about entertainment. It's not about something you study and then you know of it. It's about changing everything you are into a completely new human experience. And with that, I'll end this podcast. Thank you.